In the summer of 1829, on a cotton estate outside Natchez, Mississippi, a single question ended a man's life. It was not shouted. It was not defiant. It was asked softly, almost politely, by an enslaved man named Elias Rowe. Witnesses later said the air felt wrong when the words left his mouth. The cicadas stopped. The horses went quiet. Even the overseer, Samuel Pike, froze mid-step. Elias had been carrying laundry to the main house when the plantation owner's son, the young master, Henry Caldwell, passed him on the gallery porch. That was when Elias stopped walking. He stared, and then he asked, "Sir, why does the young master look exactly like my brother?" The question was never answered. Within the hour, Overseer Pike was dead, hanged from a magnolia tree behind the slave quarters, officially ruled a suicide. But the rope knot was wrong. The angle of the body was wrong. And everyone on the plantation knew something else was wrong too. Because Elias Rowe had never had a brother on that plantation. And yet, 3 days later, Elias himself disappeared. No bill of sale. No punishment record. No grave. Only whispers. And a child upstairs in the Caldwell house who suddenly stopped being allowed near mirrors. Caldwell Estate did something unusual for its time. It kept almost no written records. No baptism logs for enslaved children. No death notices. No ledgers of births beyond vague numbers. Historians would later find this strange, but not alarming, until church archives revealed something else. For nearly 40 years, the Caldwell family sent regular donations to 3 places: a rural orphanage, a private seminary, a women's refuge run by the church. All 3 shared the same minister, Reverend Thomas Bell. Bell preached obedience, bloodlines, and divine order. His sermons emphasized that God recognized lineage, even when society refused to speak it aloud. And on Caldwell Estate, lineage was everything. Enslaved women were rotated through the main house under the guise of domestic duty. Children born from these arrangements were quietly removed. Some were sold. Others were not recorded at all. Former slaves would later say the plantation felt like a place that folded bloodlines inward, feeding on its own secrets. One woman testified in 1871. Children would vanish, but new white children would appear, same eyes, same mouths. The town called it coincidence. The church called it God's will. But Elias Rowe saw something else. He saw his brother's face wearing silk. Elias Rowe was known for one thing: memory. He remembered faces with unsettling precision. He could recall people he had not seen in decades. He could name children who had been sold south long after everyone else forgot them. According to oral accounts, Elias once said, "Faces don't lie. They carry history like scars." When Henry Caldwell turned 16, Elias reportedly stopped sleeping. He began standing near reflective surfaces, windows, water barrels, polished trays, staring not at himself, but at reflections of the young master. Because Henry did not just resemble Elias's brother. He aged like him. Same scar near the eyebrow. Same asymmetrical smile. Same left-handed grip. Elias's brother, Jonah, had disappeared years earlier after being taken to the main house. No one had spoken Jonah's name since. Until Elias did. And once spoken, the name would not stay buried. Samuel Pike, the overseer, was not cruel by reputation. That made his death harder to explain. He was known for drinking alone, for writing letters he never sent, for asking the minister questions after Sunday service. The night before his death, Pike was seen arguing with Reverend Bell near the stables. Witnesses heard only one phrase clearly: "You can't keep folding blood back into itself." The next morning, Elias asked his question. By evening, Pike was dead. And by dawn, Reverend Bell had delivered a sermon about the danger of improper thoughts. Within weeks, Pike's personal effects were burned. His letters were never found. But one enslaved boy claimed he saw Pike crying the night before he died, holding a child's shoe far too small to be his. Elias Rowe vanished without noise. No chains, no screams, no public punishment. But his absence left a shape. People avoided the magnolia tree. Henry Caldwell stopped being seen outdoors. Mirrors in the main house were covered with cloth. And once a year, without explanation, a new child arrived at the orphanage funded by the Caldwell family. Always with dark eyes. Always with a familiar face. The church said nothing. The town said nothing. History wrote nothing. But questions, once asked, do not die. They wait. The orphanage stood 12 miles from Caldwell Estate, hidden behind a stand of cypress trees and officially named St. Mercy's Home for Wayward Youth. But no one remembered it being built. County maps from 1810 showed nothing there. Maps from 1850 showed it fully operational. No records explained how. Former staff described the building as unchanging. Paint never peeled. Wood never warped. Children never stayed long enough to grow old. One caretaker testified decades later. They arrived already quiet, like they knew too much. The children were separated by appearance, not age. Dark-eyed children were kept on the east wing. Light-eyed children on the west. No siblings were allowed to meet. Once a month, Reverend Bell visited alone. He stayed for hours. No prayers were heard. Only doors opening and closing. And always, after his visit, one child would be gone. Adopted, the records said. But no family names were listed. Only one phrase repeated again and again. Placement approved by the church. Reverend Thomas Bell's sermons were peculiar. They avoided salvation. They avoided forgiveness. Instead, he spoke of inheritance. He preached that blood remembered what people tried to forget, that sins traveled through generations, waiting for familiar vessels. One surviving sermon transcript read, "When blood is divided unnaturally, it seeks reunion, and when reunited improperly, it breeds silence." Congregants said Bell would stare at certain families while speaking, particularly those with unusually similar children. Women later recalled being questioned privately after miscarriages. Men recalled being asked about family resemblances. Bell's theology was not about heaven. It was about control of lineage. And Caldwell Estate was its most generous patron. North of Natchez stood Trinity Hollow Seminary, a private institution training young men for church leadership. It admitted boys without surnames. They were listed only by first name and date of arrival. Visitors reported a disturbing phenomenon. Portraits lining the hallways seemed to repeat faces. Different names, different years. Same eyes, same jaw, same scar near the eyebrow. A visiting deacon once remarked, "It's like the walls remember better than the people." Students were discouraged from discussing their pasts. They were told, "You are not where you came from. You are what you will become." But one student broke the rule. His name was Jonah, and he vanished within a week. The name Jonah appears repeatedly in scattered archives. Jonah Rowe, enslaved boy, age unknown, removed from Caldwell Estate. Jonah, orphan intake, St. Mercy's, no surname. Jonah Bell, seminary enrollee, benefactor unknown. Different dates. Same handwriting. A clerk once wrote in the margin, "Why does he resemble the donor's son?" The note was crossed out. The page torn. But memory persisted. Older townspeople would later recall a boy at church who looked too much like the Caldwell heir. So much so that women whispered. So much so that mirrors were avoided. The women's refuge funded by the Caldwells was meant for fallen women. In reality, it housed mothers. Women who had given birth in secrecy. Women whose children were taken immediately. They were forbidden from naming the fathers. They were forbidden from asking where the children went. One woman scratched words into the wall of her room before disappearing. "They take what looks like him." Another wrote, "Blood circles back." By 1903, the refuge closed abruptly. No explanation. No records. Only empty rooms with walls scarred by fingernails. And somewhere, children growing up with faces that did not belong to them. By the 1870s, Natchez had learned a particular skill. Selective blindness. Residents knew not to ask why certain children bore unsettling resemblances to powerful families. They knew not to comment when boys appeared at church already knowing hymns no one had taught them. A schoolteacher once attempted to chart family trees for a local census. She stopped halfway through. Her notes ended with a single sentence. "Too many branches fold inward." She resigned the next week. The town understood the unspoken rule. Resemblance was not coincidence. It was danger. And danger, when named, demanded consequences. In 1881, Henry Caldwell's son, also named Henry, visited Trinity Hollow Seminary. He walked the halls lined with portraits and stopped. One painting showed a young man identical to him. Same mouth. Same left eye slightly lower than the right. Different name. The boy reportedly asked, "Why is my face on the wall?" The headmaster answered, "Many men look alike when shaped by God." That night, the boy refused to sleep near mirrors. Within a year, he was sent away permanently. The Caldwell family told neighbors he was sickly. He was never seen again. In 1894, a fire consumed part of the county records office. Most documents were lost. One ledger survived. It contained names, dates, and a symbol repeated beside certain entries, a circle intersected by a line. Historians later theorized it marked transfers without acknowledgement. Every marked name connected back to Caldwell estate, and nearly every marked individual shared physical traits with the Caldwell line. The final entry read, question asked, balance disrupted. No name followed. Reverend Bell delivered his final sermon in 1899. He looked older than his years. His voice shook. Congregants noticed he avoided looking at the front pew, where the Caldwell family sat. His sermon was short. He said only, when blood is hidden, it rots. When truth is buried, it returns wearing familiar faces. That night, Bell locked himself inside the church. By morning, he was dead. The cause was ruled natural. But the church bell rang once, by itself, at midnight. And never again. In 1912, the Caldwell house was sold. During renovations, workers discovered a photograph hidden behind a wall. It showed two boys standing side by side. One white, one black. Identical faces. Written on the back, do not let them meet. The photograph was confiscated by the church. It was never cataloged, but copies surfaced decades later. And once seen, the resemblance could not be unseen. After 1915, something changed. Men began returning to Natchez, quiet men, well-dressed, with unfamiliar names but familiar faces. They bought property near Caldwell land. They attended church without speaking. They avoided the main house. Locals whispered that the past was circling. One barber reportedly dropped his scissors when he recognized a customer's reflection. That's the master's boy. But the master's boy died. The men never corrected anyone. They simply paid and left. By the 1920s, mirrors were removed from the Caldwell home entirely. Not covered, removed. Servants said the family feared reflections more than intruders. A maid later recalled, they said mirrors remember better than people. Children were taught never to stare too long at their own faces. One child was punished for asking, why do I look like the preacher? The question ended the conversation. In 1931, a janitor at Trinity Hollow Seminary asked a visiting benefactor, sir, have you ever been here before? The man replied, not with this name. The janitor pressed further, you look like someone who used to pray here. The next day, the janitor was gone. No termination papers. No farewell. Only his keys left on the chapel steps. In 1947, a young historian interviewed elderly residents. At first, they denied everything. Then one woman spoke. They weren't hiding sin. They were hiding continuity. She explained that powerful families believed blood could be refined by secrecy, that mixing without acknowledgement preserved dominance. Children were removed not to erase shame, but to manage resemblance. The historian's work was never published. The manuscript disappeared. No grave for Elias Rowe was ever found. But his question survived. It appeared in oral histories, in margin notes, in sermons never delivered. Why does the young master look exactly like my brother? Because questions expose systems. And systems, when exposed, collapse. The town endured. The families endured. But the silence cracked. And once cracked, it could never be sealed again.